Hi everybody, I'm Coach McCreary from Baseball by the Yard. Thanks for stopping by. If you've been a regular visitor of my site, you've noticed that most of my videos are small clips that involve little aspects of the game that I like to pass on to players and coaches. This video is a little different. It's more of a webinar and it's a more extensive video because it's dealing with a concept that is one of the fundamental aspects of coaching that it sometimes can be very difficult to do, and that is the ability to throw batting practice. Now, different coaches will do batting practice in different ways. Some coaches will have a lot of players go off to the side and hit in the cages off live pitching, and some coaches will structure live batting practice on the field during a practice session. Now, there are some drawbacks to live batting practice. One of them is time. It does take time to work your way through all the hitters on a team, and no baseball player wants to just stand around while one person hits on the field. Unfortunately, that is one of the many reasons why kids are being drawn to other sports, because of that style of practice where one kid is moving, one kid is hitting, and everyone else is standing still. So a lot of coaches will avoid that and pretty much disregard most of live batting practice altogether. And although those are concepts that do play a factor in our coaching, I personally still believe that live batting practice has a lot of value. And that's for the following reason. If players and hitters of your team are going to have to watch balls come out of a normal person's hand during a game in this particular area, I always thought it's important for them to see a ball coming out of a real person's hand in practice. If they're going to have to do it in the game, it's something that I want them to be able to do in practice. I think the major drawback, though, with live batting practice is the inability to have somebody throw batting practice. It is not an easy skill, and how much you get out of live BP totally depends on who is throwing the batting practice. If you have someone on your team that is very good at it, who throws a consistent pitch right down the middle, boy, all your hitters are going to have a great time. Those throwers are worth their weight in gold. However, if you have coaches that do not have the ability to throw a very good batting practice, sometimes you could be doing more harm to your hitters than good. So obviously there's a lot of drawbacks to live batting practice, and it takes some time to structure it properly, but I do believe there's a lot of value in throwing live batting practice. Now let's face it, there's going to be some people out there who, regardless of what they do, they're never going to be able to be good batting practice throwers. And that's where other hitting drills come in. There's many drills that involve short toss, soft toss, tee work, and maybe those drills are better suited for you. But this video hopefully will pass on a lot of tips, which will, if you want to become a better thrower of batting practice, hopefully will be able to help you do that more effectively. Whether you're a coach or whether you're a parent, hopefully the tips that I provide will give you some insight on how to become a better thrower of batting practice. All right, folks, so let's get started here. This video is going to pass on 10 tips on how to become a better thrower of batting practice. Plus, it's going to give you 2 additional bonus tips to help you do that as well. So let's get started, folks. I hope you enjoy it. The first tip I want to give is practicing what you preach. Now, coaches, when we deal with pitchers, we tend to spend a lot of time focusing on 4 concepts to help our pitchers become better on the mound. The first one is efficient mechanics. The second one is work quick. The third one is throw strikes. And the last one is repeat your delivery. If pitchers can do those 4 things, they're going to have a lot more success on the mound. But coaches who want to throw a better batting practice will find that if they also do those 4 things, they will become much better at that basic task of throwing batting practice. So let's take a look at each one of those 4 things separately, and I'll explain how they apply to throwing batting practice. If we want to be better at throwing batting practice, we have to be very efficient in our mechanics. More efficiency in our mechanics means less effort on our body, which means we can last longer. In throwing that batting practice session, we can get through more batters, and more importantly, we can save time. One of the challenges that coaches face is when they throw live batting practice, it takes a considerable amount of time to do that. The more efficient you are with your mechanics, the less time you'll be spending in live batting practice. So the question then becomes, how do we become more efficient when we're actually throwing batting practice? And one of the things we try to tell pitchers a lot is to try to get rid of all the unnecessary motion when we're pitching. It's going to save energy, it's going to keep our body under control, and it's going to allow us to throw more strikes. Well, those same principles apply here. I tell people it's like throwing a dart. If I'm holding a dart and going to throw it at the dartboard, it's going to be very little movement, just basically a short dart throw to the target. Well, the same principle applies with throwing batting practice. The more I turn, the more I have my knee up, the bigger the arm circle, all that stuff is unnecessary motion. If I'm going to throw batting practice, I want to basically just throw a nice little firm little dart, step, small circle, and a throw. Nothing much more than that. I'm getting rid of all the unnecessary motion and just a short dart throw, enough to get it in there with firm velocity and throwing it over the plate. Coaches, we all know one of the worst things about baseball is how long sometimes the games can be. And there's nothing worse than having a pitcher out there who is very slow around the mound and everybody is falling asleep. Well, guys, the same principle works with throwing batting practice. You have to work quick. Now, there's a difference between working quick and hurrying. Hurrying means you're skipping steps just to be faster. And whenever we skip steps at anything in baseball, we're going to screw things up, we're going to make mistakes. And for the guy throwing batting practice, it means less strikes and more time that it's going to take to throw that batting practice session. So you want to work quick, but you don't want to skip any steps. Folks, throwing strikes is the name of the game if you're a pitcher, and it's the same thing with throwing batting practice. As a hitter, there aren't many things worse than taking a full batting practice session and having that batting practice pitcher not be able to throw the ball over the plate. Hitters are trying to work on things, and they can't work on things very well if they have no idea where the ball is going to be. So throwing consistent strikes is going to help any batting practice thrower become better at that job. So one of the challenges of throwing batting practice is often you are throwing to a blank space. Now, some coaches, to combat that, will have a catcher during batting practice. My point of view is I always saw that as cruel and unusual punishment for my catchers. There is no catcher on any team in the world who enjoys getting the equipment on and catching during batting practice. So I would never have my catchers do it. But again, it creates a dilemma that if there is nothing back there like a catcher to aim to, it becomes tougher sometimes to throw strikes. So to combat that, my tip here is to put something where the catcher would be sitting. In this case, it would be a bucket. If you have a tarp behind the batter, you could paint a strike zone. You could paint an X. You could put tape. Whatever it is, a helmet, a hat, a bucket, a chair, anything, put it where the catcher would be, and that will give you something to throw to and allow you to throw more strikes. We all know that repeating your delivery as a pitcher is one of the most important things that all pitchers can do. If a pitcher can repeat their mechanics over and over and over, their body will go on autopilot, and they won't generally have to think about throwing strikes, having balance, and so forth. Their body will just take over because they've done it so often. Well, the same principle applies with throwing strikes. If I can get my mechanics down pat and just repeat that delivery over and over again, my body will go on autopilot and it'll be strike after strike after strike. Tip number 2 is make sure you know your distance when it comes to throwing batting practice. Of course, the longer the distance, the more energy you're taking out of yourself, and it's going to be harder to throw. You're going to wear down faster, you're going to stop throwing strikes, and it's just going to be tougher to do. Of course, if we're too close, then that can cause some challenges as well. You're not giving the batter enough time to get set and load up and do the things that he needs to do. But too far, you're going to wear yourself down. So every batting practice pitcher has to find that comfortable distance. So don't be afraid to move that screen up or a little bit back to find that comfortable distance, because once you do, throwing batting practice will be much easier. Okay, folks, the next tip is how to hold the baseball. Now, we tell pitchers that if you want the ball to go straight, you hold the ball as a four-seam fastball. If you want movement, if you want this ball to sink or run, then a two-seam fastball is what you want. But when you're throwing batting practice, you want a ball that goes completely straight. So therefore, the proper grip is a four-seam fastball, so that ball goes straight as an arrow or as straight as you can possibly make it to make it easy for that hitter to hit. There isn't much worse as a hitter than to have a pitcher out there on the mound throwing batting practice and that ball's running and sinking, running in up in your hands. Nothing worse than that. So throw a ball right down the middle as straight as you can, and that requires a four-seam fastball. Okay, the next tip involves another number 4, but this time instead of a four-seam grip, it's 4 baseballs. Now, I always liked, when I was throwing batting practice to my guys, to make sure I always held 4 baseballs, at least to start. 3 in my bare hand and 1 in my throwing hand. That did a couple things for me. First off, it saves me time. I don't have to keep reaching in the bucket after every single throw. The reason why I only keep 3 is because when you try to keep more than 3, or at least when I did, I found that I had trouble holding all 4 of those. And when I tried at times, I'd be more concerned about holding all the balls, and it affected my ability to throw strikes. So 3 in my bare hand makes it easy to hold. No problem in terms of keeping them under control, and also allows me to focus on throwing strikes. So 4-seam grip, but also 4 balls at a time. It can also help with your count. Sometimes when you're in the rhythm of throwing batting practice, we forget how many swings the batter had. But if we always start off with 4 baseballs, obviously that's going to make it much easier to remember how many swings based on how many balls we have left. Okay, the next tip, folks, is a proper placement and use of a ball bucket. Now, I'm a big fan of using multiple buckets during batting practice. One bucket I would put out in center field or even on the baselines to collect the balls when they're hit. But more importantly, I want a bucket right in front of me. And most importantly, I want a bucket that is sitting on either a chair or a stool. The more I have to bend over to pick up balls out of the bucket, the more energy I'm expiring, the more time it's going to take for me to get through that batting practice session. I will also position that bucket at a location that is natural in terms of where I finish. So if I'm throwing batting practice and when I follow through, I'm going to naturally move like this. It makes sense to have that bucket right here so that when I am done my pitch, I am right here. I can just reach in and grab another ball, back up, make the throw, reach in, grab another one, okay? So not only elevating that bucket a little bit, but put it in a spot where it goes with your natural flow of your rotation and your follow through. Put that bucket right there. That will help with the efficiency of getting balls back in your hand and throwing a quicker batting practice. Okay, folks, the next tip here obviously involves a screen. Now, most times when you're throwing batting practice, you're going to use an L screen. This, of course, is a big rebounder, but what I've done is I put a rope here in the form of an L to replicate an L screen. And my importance for showing this is you have to make sure when you're throwing batting practice that you get behind the screen. It seems like common sense, but even experienced batting practice throwers will get hit with the ball because they fail to get behind the screen. Now, certainly it would make sense when I throw batting practice, I'm not going to stand in the open section of the screen. I want to make sure that I am over here. So if you're throwing batting practice correctly, your arm should go in the open spot, but your body should be behind the screen. You also want to be careful that after you throw and follow through, my head is protected by the screen, but often my hip can be exposed. So you want to make sure that even on your follow through, all parts of your body are behind that screen so that you are not getting hit. Also, before you start going through the batting practice session, you want to make sure you check out any spaces that are in the screen, because obviously those are danger spots where a ball can come through, so make sure you know where those spots are. Also, you always want to look underneath the screen too, because often some screens will have some space underneath, and line drives and hard ground balls can be hit and get under the screen there as well. So always use the screen, Be careful of where your body position is. Make sure it's behind that cutout, and you'll be much safer when you're throwing batting practice. Okay, the next tip is having a consistent release point. Now, very much like we would teach pitchers that when they pitch, they want to make sure they have a consistent spot. They're releasing the ball at the same location. Fastballs here, curveballs, sliders, changeups should all be released at the same spot to deceive that hitter. But when we're throwing batting practice, it's also important that we keep a consistent release point so that batter always sees the ball coming out of your hand very easily. One of the challenges as a hitter taking batting practice is having to hit off someone who is constantly changing that release point, which can affect how the ball moves. We want consistent strikes, but we also want a consistent release point. It's okay if you have a little bit of movement on your ball as a batting practice pitcher, as long as that movement is consistent. It's the same kind of movement on every single pitch. Changing your release point changes the way the ball moves, and that's generally not a good idea when you're throwing batting practice. You want consistency, and that starts with a proper release point. Now, one bonus here in terms of having a proper release point is something that I call a figure eight. For some pitchers, it's very easy to get that release point to the proper spot depending on their natural throwing ability. However, there's a little tip here that I call a figure eight, and it's something that a batting practice pitcher can practice, and it basically involves forming a number 8 with the arm in the throwing process. Often that can help your arm get to a consistent release point. So a figure 8 starts with holding the ball in front of you just like this, and then the start of the 8, the top of the 8, is the ball's going to come up and around, very much like you're starting a figure 8. So up, around, and then you step in the proper release point. So if you are having trouble throwing strikes, if you're having trouble consistently getting to the proper release point, try performing a figure 8. Starting the ball here, up, around, back, and throw. You get the ball again, up, around, back, and throw. Sometimes performing that figure 8 with your arm can help get your arm in the habit and the flow of moving through and getting it to the proper release point every single pitch. Folks, one of the more important tips I can pass on is making sure that you have a consistent rhythm. Often that will take care of a lot of energy issues. As long as you keep up the same rhythm in terms of the footsteps and the arm path, generally your body will go on autopilot. So one of the things that I would do is when I'm throwing batting practice to my teams is I would have a smooth rhythm with my footwork and my release point, which allows me to go through the throwing process in a very efficient way. So my motion when I'm throwing batting practice is I would hold the ball up and start with my right foot here, and my rhythm would be this. I'd throw, just take one step back, ball comes up, throw, take one step back, show the ball, throw, one step back. Now when I'm doing this process here, I'm making sure all the batters know what my rhythm is going to be. And that allows them to time it, to start their loading up process, for their stride. And I have one consistent, smooth rhythm where all I am doing is repeating the rhythm, the arm path, and the release point every time. And I have a very efficient style of throwing batting practice. Everything stays the same, and I can do this pretty much all day long. When we change that rhythm, we throw and we turn around and take an additional steps, or we bend down to pick up balls where the bucket is misplaced, that is messing up our rhythm. And one of the things you try to do in a game, of course, is to try to get a pitcher out of his rhythm. If you allow a pitcher to get into that consistent, smooth rhythm of the game, that benefits the pitcher. And so the offense's job is to try to get him out of that rhythm. Well, use that to your benefit as a batting practice pitcher. Stay in one rhythm and just repeat that rhythm over and over. And even though you may get tired, if your body is used to that consistent rhythm of stepping and throwing at the same pace and that same rhythm, your body will go on autopilot, you'll throw more strikes, and you'll be a better batting practice pitcher. All right, everybody, the next tip I'm going to give you involves 3 number ones. The first number one is one pitch, okay? I mentioned before a 4-seam fastball. We want to throw one pitch when we're throwing a batting practice, and that is just a straight fastball. Proper release point, proper grip, same pitch. We also want to throw one location, okay? We do not want to be moving the ball in and out on the hitters. That drives them crazy. Throw to one spot, probably about thigh high out over the plate, which allows that hitter free rein to make some good swings and develop some confidence as well. The last number one involves one speed. There are very few things about batting practice that hitters hate more than pitchers who change speeds when they throw batting practice. Hitters are trying to get into a rhythm, and in order to do that, they need a consistent pitch, a consistent location, and a consistent speed. So do the best you can to do those 3 things. Throw the same pitch over and over, throw it to the exact same spot, and make sure you're throwing it at the same speed. Okay, folks, tip number 10 here is to practice. Now, as a coach, we would never accept any of our pitchers to be lazy and to not practice all these basic concepts so that when they get on the mound, they can become a better pitcher. Well, guys, dads, coaches, moms, the same principle applies to you. If you want to be a better batting practice pitcher, you've got to practice. And all you need is a ball and a wall. So I have a rebounder set up here, and real simple, it's about 10 feet away. All I'm going to do is go through the mechanics, the rhythm, trying to repeat my delivery and do all those 10 things that I talked about here today. Real simple, throw and catch the ball off the wall and pretend that we are throwing to a batter. Real simple, like we tell our infielders, just work on the footwork. We tell our pitchers proper release point, repeating that delivery, and we can do that very easily by ourselves without much equipment. So get off the couch, get out there and practice. That's the only way you're going to become a better batting practice thrower. All right, everybody, well, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you learned something today, and whether you're a coach or a parent, hopefully the tips that I passed on will help you become a better thrower of batting practice. I personally think there's a lot of value in it, whether you're dealing with your own son or daughter or whether you are organizing batting practice for an entire team. Live batting practice can be a very important part of your hitting success. Well, I'm Coach McCreary, everybody. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and best of luck to all of you.